Well, good afternoon, everybody. My name's Simon Rayner. Most recently, I've been Chief Executive of the Jewellers Association based in the Jewellery Quarter in Birmingham, and I'll come a little bit more to that later. What I want to run through this afternoon is marketing strategy, my experience of it, how I've used it, and the benefits that it can actually create to business. But I'll just give you a little bit of a background to myself. And the reasons why I've been sort of so heavily involved and interested in marketing over the years. And I do, in hindsight, wish that in my generation that there had been apprentices, because that might have caused me to take another career path. But as it was the academic route. I studied a business studies degree at Birmingham City University. And with that, there was an option on the course for international marketing. And that's when you get a stage in life when the sort of the light bulb goes off in your life and you think, yep, that's what I want to do. This is what I want to focus on. And it sort of created a whole new interest for me and actually to follow the marketing route. From that, I then took the diploma of Chartered Institute of Marketing, and I've been fully committed to employing marketing practices ever since in whatever role I've been in, and doing my best to actually make sure that the people I've worked with and work for me actually understand the sort of the very basic principles. Now, when I was doing my Chartered Institute exams, and you get lots of textbooks, so I'm sure you've got to do lots of reading, but I'm going to condense marketing into one sentence for you, and that's common sense, because that essentially is what marketing is all about, is understanding what people want and then making sure that you provide what they need. But specifically this afternoon, I'm going to talk about marketing strategy. Now, for me to put that into context, any business or any individual, when they start up in business or got a marketing challenge, you need to set some objectives of what you want your business to do. I want to sell more, or I want to be a bigger company, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. From that then leads to developing a strategy. How are you then going to make sure those objectives are met? And then you can actually then dilute the strategy down into a plan. And you can have a finance strategy, a business strategy, and most specifically, as I say, what we want to focus on today is a marketing strategy. Now, marketing strategy essentially is all about communication. And what it helps is for you to identify what your customers want, who they are, where they are, and the price they want to pay. And it is based on very good research. Now, I've been involved in a lot of mentoring of businesses on a marketing base, range from startups right through to fully blown companies who've actually got a business up and running, but they've hit a wall and they haven't really known where to go with their business. And one thing I found, particularly in the sort of the design creative area, is that people have excellent ideas for starting a business or being part of a business, but they struggle in actually making that design idea or concept work. And this really is where marketing comes in, because if you take anything away from this seminar today, it is you must make what people want to buy. You can't survive in business if you make or design something that won't sell. And that's actually understanding, as I said before, what your customer wants and how you're going to make something work. Now, many years ago, I worked for a brand distributor, distributing gifts and watches throughout the UK. I'll just give you a good example of how marketing strategy works and actually being able to listen to the customer. I was on a flight to Zurich for a business meeting. I was flying BA, had a look through their in-flight catalogue and saw some manicure scissors. I think these were selling for something like £50, something like that. Tremendously expensive for what they were. And part of our product portfolio was this. And that is what's called a Swiss card. Now, it's a very neat thing. And it's actually got the manicure scissors inside, it's got a penknife, and it's got a pen, it's got a nail file. Hope you can all see that. And what I did was actually take that product to British Airways and said, I think this will do really well in your in-flight program. And they looked at it and they say, we love it, but we can't sell it because of that. It's too dangerous. It's a knife. And regardless of the fact they probably still then had metal cutlery on board serving the food. So by listening to what they wanted, rather than me then failing in the sale, I went back to the manufacturers in Switzerland, and explained there was potential demand for this product, but we needed to modify the design to actually suit what the customer needed. So the clever idea was to take that and to blunt the sharp part of it and make it into a letter opener rather than a penknife. Took it back to Boulay, and we essentially just sold bucket loads of this stuff for years and years. And that's just a simple thing of being able to understand customer needs and, most importantly, to listen, to pick up the signals of what people really want from you. And as I said before, if you take anything away from the seminar, it's being able to provide what people want to buy and not necessarily what you want to sell or to make. Now, understanding the customer also allows you to understand the market that you're in. Now, a tactic that I've very often employed is to try and understand who my typical consumer is. And particularly when I was mentoring companies, I got them to actually design who their typical customer was. So you look at their age group, you look at the sex, where they live, the amount of money they have to spend, where they choose to shop. And you can actually build a picture of the consumer. And from that, you can actually then identify your whole marketing strategy, how you're going to communicate with them, how you're going to get the products to market, what the right type of retailers should be. Now, without that vital information, and if one of my objectives is I want to sell more, is who do I sell more to? And it's by understanding the customer and the wider market that will actually allow that to happen. Now, in a particular case again, and I go back to the Victorinox Swiss Army days, I always had a theory, and based on this marketing strategy, that you place your product where your typical consumer chooses to shop. Now, if you have that philosophy, you actually open up a world of opportunities, because if, for example, I was selling a watch, it doesn't necessarily have to be sold in a jeweller's shop, but it has to be sold where my typical customer, who I've already identified, chooses to shop. Now, in the case of Swiss Army knives, we looked upon that, identified it more as a gift than as a necessity. But that allowed a lot of openings as far as being able to develop new distribution channels, so that people were going in and buying it as an impulse product rather than as a product of necessity. And that was hugely successful as far as brand development and market development for the product was concerned. So ideally, you need to understand who your customer is. Now, part of the research that you do as far as your strategic direction is being able to understand also that the market that you're involved in. And this will actually help with advertising and understanding particularly the opportunities and threats. And again, a good part of marketing strategy should be that you are aware of the opportunities and threats as they come along. And I would always advocate that a business be more proactive than it is reactive. Now, in the world of marketing, this is fine for a marketeer to say, because in the real world, companies who actually have to survive, they're worried about cash flow, they're worried about how they're going to get stuff to market, they're worried when their designs have got to be ready. There are probably other considerations that they actually have to take in account, and marketing might fall a little bit down the pecking order. What I strongly suggest, and from my experience, the most successful companies, those who've got their marketing strategy at the top of their order of priorities, because without marketing you can't make the right products. You don't know who you're going to sell it to, and you're probably going to get the price and distribution completely incorrect. So it's knowing the wider market, which is part of the research. And I most certainly would advocate that whatever field that you're involved in, you do some research on who you're making products for, who you're designing for, attend trade shows, read the trade press, read and research around the area that you're really involved with, so you get a far broader picture of the market that you actually have to satisfy. And from my own experience, that has created a host of new opportunities, because if you can actually have the ability to understand what is happening in the future, or potentially what will happen in the future, you can stop the threats, and you can actually take advantage of new opportunities that will be available to you. And if I go back to my own industry, the jewelry industry, when gold prices were very, very high about 2 or 3 years ago, and are now coming back into that extent, retailers were stuck with, well, how do we sell jewelry because it's too expensive? So they actually, understanding the opportunities available to them, changed their business model to be able to buy people's gold in, and this was the whole rise of the cash for gold era, rather than having to rely upon selling jewelry. They adapted to the market conditions that were actually prevalent to them. Also, good research will actually make you aware of the rules and regulations that you have to abide by to actually run a business. And this is, again, a very important part as far as marketing strategy is concerned. There are a lot of EU regulations coming through, and regardless of Brexit, they're still going to be with us. If they're going to be passed in the next 2 years, they're going to be with us unless we actually decide at some stage to get rid of them. And companies have to be aware of this, and there's almost like a law of unintended consequences, particularly in the jewelry industry with new technical regulations that will actually probably put a company off course slightly. So it's very, very correct for companies to sort of spend a lot of time understanding the environment that you're working with. What I've also seen over the last 2 to 3 years is this wonderful word, the millennial consumer. Now, people need to understand this segment of the market as being critical, really, to the survival of the retail industry. Millennial consumers are far more picky about what they want to buy. They're more interested in having an experience. The environment in a retail setting has to be correct, and they need to know far more about the products that they're buying. And this has been this huge rise, and again relating to the jewelry industry, particularly with that of ethical trading. So we've had the rise of companies, particularly in the jewelry quarter, and organisations like Fairtrade, who realise the importance of supplying the needs of this market, so that when customers ask questions in store, the retailers are actually being able to answer these questions by saying, yeah, I do know where the gold from, I do know where the diamonds come from. And this is a whole new dynamic within the industry. Now, I know the jewelry industry is very slow on the uptake as far as being very proactive in this case, but it has taken a leaf out of the books, particularly of the fashion industry, which recently has started a campaign, do you know where your clothes were made? And it's the whole thing about more responsibility and companies engaging with good corporate responsibility, social responsibility practices. Excuse me just a minute. What I also need to mention as well is that when you're actually understanding the market that you're involved in, you've got the customers, you've got the market sorted out, what are your competitors doing? What's going on with them, and how will they actually influence your business? And again, this is actually key to marketing strategy, because when you actually dilute your strategy into a marketing plan, and a marketing plan essentially is very basically the mixture of product, price, distribution. Product price distribution, is that you have to get that mix right to actually make sure that your products are successful. Now, competitor analysis will allow you to know what price they're selling their products, where they're selling it, the design of it, etc. So, leading on to best practice, the most critical thing that needs to be done is that you regularly need to talk to your customers. There's no point in actually making something, designing something and selling something and thinking that is the end of the transaction. You need to be in constant dialogue with your customers. And the whole thing about good communication is you've got to make this two-way. There is no point in actually devising a plan where it's only you talking to the market. You need to actually invite two-way response. Now, I would actually look at this, most specifically, you do it on a one-to-one basis, go out and see people, and actually do your own research to actually understand what's going on. Now, a very good example was when I was doing some mentoring many years ago, and this is a long-established company, quite a successful jewellery company, as I thought, had about 30 to 40 good retailers on his books, and I just asked the basic question, when did you last go and see your customers? And he said, I've never gone to see my customers. Now, that to me is a jaw-dropping statement, because if you not necessarily go and see your customers, how are you going to develop your products, knowing what sells well, know what they're looking for? I like this piece, but I'd like you to make it in something else, or it needs to be a slightly different price point. And you need that continual feedback to make your business develop and grow. So, conclusion really here is research, research, research. Things to look out for, or things to avoid, is that, as I mentioned before, other disciplines tend to get in the way, but you do really need to understand the bigger picture, and that is absolutely key to successful marketing. Now, just as a few anecdotes of sort of my own experiences. Several years ago, I worked for a major jewelry and watch distributor that had a small business in the States selling just purely by mail order, which they used to release catalogues, and they used to actually take orders from that with a distribution center based on the East Coast in the States. I came into the company primarily to open up a distribution route for them with retailers. Now, go back to what I was saying earlier, that by good research and by having a sound strategy in place, understanding where your shoppers choose to shop. Now, I knew that if I went down a conventional retail route and actually started selling to retail, my competition would be absolutely huge, and it would probably be a sale based on price rather than by brand values. At that stage, and again, knowing what the market was doing and where the future was, TV home shopping was very booming, and it's a totally different animal than it is to the UK. Now, it was my association with these TV home shopping channels that actually allowed me to get a foot into the US market. Now, what TV home shopping does, it allows you a free advert basically for an hour where they're selling your products for you. So it's a win-win situation. So the brands that I was selling got a tremendous exposure within the States, and then we're talking about sort of major organizations, Home Shopping Network and QVC US. And from that, I was then able to open a lot of other distribution routes, which included Amazon. We eventually got into Sears department store network, both online and through their stores, and through a government organization that ran all of the military stores. There was something like 3,500 of them in the US. But that was by thinking, I've got a challenge, I need to sell something. But by understanding what my market was, who my customers were, where they chose to shop, actually made it quite a simple proposition. Now, if you were faced with the proposition that whatever business you're involved in and someone gives you a blank sheet of paper and say, I want you to go and open up the United States market for me, you'd think, oh my goodness, how am I going to do it? But with careful thought and with this marketing discipline behind you, it will allow you to actually see things a lot more clearly. And just to repeat myself, it will help with price, it will help with the product design, understanding the customer, understanding the market, how you're going to distribute it, etc. So that's me literally done. I think I have a few questions. So first question, what is the difference between B2B and B2C? So B2B being business-to-business marketing and B2C being business-to-consumer. And there are companies who engage with both of this. Now, essentially, business-to-business is what I would call trade marketing. You are making something and you're actually selling to another supplier within the supply chain. You are not selling to the end user, you are not selling to the customer, which essentially is what B2C, business to consumer, actually relates to. And B2C might involve fully blown press advertising, magazine work, possibly quite an expensive route, or was until the rise of social media. And B2B marketing is probably just a little bit more low-key and is more based on personal interaction and going to meet people, going to trade shows, than rather going directly to the consumer. The most successful campaign you have done or seen. Many years ago, I was involved as a partner in a marketing design agency in the West Midlands, and we picked up a remarkable client called Mr. Tompkinson's Carpets, based in Kidderminster, and they'd come out with a whole range of sort of really funky coloured carpets and interior design products, which compared to the staid pattern carpet was quite revolutionary and a lot of fun. What we had to do as the agency, and this was done on a B2C basis, so we were talking directly to the consumer, what we decided to do was not actually sell the product, but how to use the product. So we came up with a lot of new brochures and advertising on how colours can actually work in a room, the difference that stripes make, you know, whether they go sort of north to south or west to east as far as increasing the size of a room. You know, what light do you have in your room, and will that affect the carpet colouring, or how the carpet colour will actually affect the room. So it was the whole point was actually creating ideas and providing good information to the consumers, which would then help them buy the actual product. Bye-bye.